So I begin with a prayer dedicated to Swami Vivekananda. Om Namah Sri Atirajaya Vivekananda Suraye Satchit Sukha Swarupaya Swamine Tapaharine. So this is the second talk in the series of talks on Raj Yoga of Swami Vivekananda. So far, to recapitulate what we discussed in the previous class, most of you were present. So I'll just recapitulate what we discussed. The first thing we discussed that about this particular book is it is an original book written by Swami Vivekananda specially for the readers of the West, to whom he wanted to introduce the science of religion. You mark my words, the science of religion. Religion was known to entire humanity for centuries. And it was known to the mystics, it was known to a lot of people, practitioners of religion, saints and prophets. So religion was not a new thing in the West. They had their own religions. Christianity was there, Islam was there, the influence of Islam, Buddhism. These are all universal religions. But when Swami Vivekananda came to the West, there were a lot of sects of Christianity coexisting. There were Protestants, there was the Roman Catholic Church, and there were a lot of organized religion, very popular among the masses, especially when things go wrong in society. People often turn to religion because they always believe that religion is a saving hope. But unfortunately, a vast majority of mankind do not know why religion or how religion can be a saving factor in our lives. How does it result in transformation, transcendence, and a better quality of life, lead to fulfillment, joy, and all those things form the essential part of every religion. Wherever religion has been practiced in its true spirit in the entire world, wherever it may be, whatever may be the source of that religion. It may be a religion with books or it may be a religion without books. It may be a primitive tribal religion. But all religions, if there is some truth in them, they focus on one thing: to promise humanity a better life, a more fulfilled life. It also serves a very important purpose, according to Swami Vivekananda, to remove our misery on a sustainable basis, on a permanent basis. And also it enables us to get rid of the fear of death, which is one of the primal fears which humankind, which mankind or even animals share with us. There is no creature, living being, including the plants, in this universe who does not have a fear of death. Fear of death, by fear of death, I mean fear of the physical existence. It's not exactly death as we understand. What exactly death is, we don't have to understand philosophy to know that. But for a common man, as for a common animal, death means when we cease to exist in this physical body, which we think is the be all and end all of life. So as scientists believe, modern scientists who are at the same time atheists, I'm not talking of those scientists who pursue science in the true spirit and who also accept religion if it is presented to them in a scientific way. I'm not talking of those scientists. They are really great benefactors of humanity because they've used a method based on truth, experimental verification, and experience, which they use in external sciences, and are willing to use the same methodology while inquiring into the veracity of religion. The only study, the subject of study in this case becomes internal states and internal, the subtle things, not the gross things which we observe. Of course, scientists also study things which are very subtle, which are not experimentally uh, perceived, or maybe they can be induced by certain theory. There are so many inventions which scientists have made, where viruses and all these bacteria, which are normally not perceivable by the ordinary senses, they have discovered instruments and gadgets which can go deeper into these uh, deeper into the external world, the unseen world. Though it is not an unseen world, there is something which you can still perceive. The smallest microbe or the smallest living being is still perceivable if you have magnification, or if you have the instruments to study them. That is subtle, no doubt, but it is not as subtle as studying your own mind, or as studying the subtle states, the subtle forces which influence humankind. We have a wonderful personality, as I told you, which comprises of 5 layers basically. That is what Vedanta does, explains the whole of our existence, our personality, into 5 layers. It is worth repeating, because without the understanding of this, we cannot understand anything about spirituality. What exactly is spirituality? What exactly Jesus meant when he said, "My kingdom is the kingdom of the spirit, not the kingdom of this world." Then what does he mean? If we don't accept this world, then where do we go? What is this spirit? Is there any scientific proof, or is there any experiential proof of the spirit which we speak of? We speak of the spirit, we do not know what it means, and if we just accept these realities on faith, it doesn't make sense. I believe because my prophets, my ancestors, my books believe in that, doesn't make me any better than any other person in this universe. It is, in fact, Swami Vivekananda very clearly says in Rajyog that an atheist is much better. He is honest. He just believes what he experiences. So a true religious person, especially the practitioners of Raj Yoga, the goal set before us is that if you believe in religion, or if you believe in spirituality, then you should strive to have those experiences yourself. The experiences which somebody has promised in his scripture, and if some prophet, or not prophet, somebody tells you that you have to take these prophets on face value, and it was possible in that life, it was possible for Jesus, it was possible for Krishna, it was possible for all these saints to get those experiences, but it is not possible now, because it was possible for them to get those experiences, but it is not possible now because circumstances have changed. Then Swami Vivekananda says, don't believe such people. Because if Moses had an experience, or if Jesus had an experience, or any prophet who claims that he had a spiritual experience, and if we are believers, or if we follow those prophets, then, or even Buddha and Krishna and all these great saints, no, none of them have said these experiences cannot be had by you. All of them promise that we had these experiences, and if you live the life as we tell you to do, I mean, based on our experience, if you follow the system of discipline, or if you follow the system of life as we did, then the same experience can be repeated. This is the true scientific methodology which scientists believe. They say gravity is, if gravity is true and proved in the laboratory, and we have equations for them, then it is universally valid. You go to any any laboratory in the world, it should be proved there. So a rational approach, or a scientific approach to religion, is what these prophets actually preached. But unfortunately, the followers accepted, or were satisfied with the face value of those teachings, and then made it into a dogma. They said Buddha never said. He said Buddha is a state which I have achieved, or I have experienced. And I promise every one of you who hope to follow me in the future to get those same experiences yourself, because Buddhahood is a state which I attained, and it is possible for you also to attain to that state if you follow a systematic discipline. So Raj Yoga, according to Swamiji, is a book which teaches you, which does not ask you to believe. So that's why in the introduction he says there are two types of religions in the world. One is with books, the other religion is without books. By books I mean the scriptures. The Christians have the Bible, Hindus have the Gita, Upanishads, the Muslims have their Quran. There are so many wonderful books which have been handed over from generation to generation and which people study and get inspiration. And there are some religions which just came into existence because of their prophets. Unfortunately, nothing what they said was recorded. Only their lives are known and some experiences are known. Some partial literature is available. So there may not be a fixed book. So there may be a vast gathering, a collection of the spiritual experiences of several saints which pass off as religion. So in whatever may be the type of religion, with books or without books, Swamiji says the books, or having a book or not having a book, is not important. But having an experience, the same experience as the founders of that religion or that sect had, if you have that same experience, then whether you have books or not, it doesn't matter. But the experiences will validate itself every generation, in every generation. And when it comes successively through a series of sadhakas or series of practitioners, and they come down to humanity after generations. See, for example, Christianity, it has come down from Jesus, from his apostles, and then from the church, and from the various prophets and saints who came up now and then. So also in the Indian tradition, you will find this very, very special word which is known as the Guru Parampara. So this Guru Parampara, even when you study the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, the yoga practitioners also salute their Adi Guru, who is Patanjali. The Patanjali who actually wrote these sutras, who founded the system of yoga based on certain disciplines and Ashtanga Yoga, 8 steps, which he put down in book form and has come down to us, and we study with the help of various commentaries. So he doesn't claim that what I experienced is my unique experience. He says this is an experience which I got by a systematic practice of all these 8 steps. And he says anybody in the future who has the patience to practice it, as mentioned in this book, this particular book, you will attain the same truths, the same realizations, the same experiences which he got. So it is not unique to Patanjali. So there is no such thing as an authority. He says you don't have to believe me as an authority. You try yourself and practice. So that is why Swami Vivekananda wanted to put before the Western world, who were losing their faith in religion, when the science was at its supremacy, was just picking up, and they believed that this scientific way to study the world, though they studied only the external world, was the only way which could satisfy the rational mind. So a lot of people failed to understand the real purport of these prophets, of the religious people, the religious founders of different religious prophets or the religious founders. And then instead of studying religion in a rational way, just as we do science, they try to enforce religion in a dogmatic way. So that is the fault with all organized religions, where by majority of the people try to push it down the throat of people, saying that These are the dogmas you have to follow. If you are a Christian, you have to follow these dogmas. If you are a Muslim, you have to follow. If you are a Hindu, you have to follow these things. These are the dogmas, and though they have a scientific basis, very few people were encouraged to even try to find out if those values or those spiritual experiences can be had by us, a day to day, a person in a day to day world who is living with all the problems. Can he hope to solve the misery he faces? Can he hope to solve the problem of death? Can he hope to solve the problems which he encounters in his day-to-day life, in his career, in his profession, in his homes, in his relationship with other human beings, with the environment in general? So all these questions were asked. Does religion help us to do that? Science, of course, they said, though science has its negative views, it has been used negatively for destroying people. But at the same time, there are good uses of science, and people believe that science can, to a certain extent, remove our sorrows, our miseries, and knowledge which they generate. To a certain extent, at some levels, it helps us to solve the problems. But have they solved all the problems? Why have they not solved all the problems? Why do we think that religion has also a role to play? When I say religion, I am always referring to religion as spirituality, mind you. When you say religion, it is the spiritual core of religion that I am referring to. So humanity also knew that without religion, as Einstein said, religion without science is blind, and science without religion is lame. So science and religion both need each other. You cannot, the scientific spirit, I mean, it's not just the external science. External science has done a lot of good to this world, but unfortunately it was not complemented by religion, and the religious people failed to convince the scientific people to use religion for the good of the world. So there were some evil people who use science for evil purposes, just as people use religion for evil purposes. There were a substantial number of people, scientists, who misused science for evil purposes, not for transforming human lives or not for betterment of society or betterment of environment and all those things. So that's why Swami Vivekananda warns us and says this Raja Yoga is also a science like any other science. And mind you, when you are dealing with this science, you will also get the benefits of religion, of this yoga, and they can be used for good purposes or they can even destroy you. The benefits of spirituality, the benefits of Raj Yoga, which we want to get through our sadhana or through our spiritual practices, definitely can save you, but if misused can harm you also. So it is like handling truth, handling the truths of science. If you use it properly, it will benefit you. It's like a double-edged sword. So you do not really know when you attempt this science what are the pitfalls, whether, first of all, whether this Raj Yoga, like any other science, can be verified and can be shown to show, can be proved that, or it can show that it can really transform our lives and benefit us in a substantial way. If it does, then it is worth studying, like studying any other science. So Swamiji says, two tests we have to apply when we try to study Raj Yoga. First of all, it should be scientific, it should be verifiable, and it should be based on experiences, not just hearsay or not just dogma. Second thing, three steps are necessary. First, it is not based on the experiences of the past. The person who is practicing this yoga must experience it himself. And third, he should be shown the method how to practice it so that he can get that experience. Just as you have to study a lot to learn the experimental methods and then get into some college and do research. So also Raj Yoga is not a science which can be learnt so easily. That's why Swamiji is warning us or cautioning us that don't think that it is a easy science. It is difficult, in the sense it is as difficult as you study an external science. In fact, it is more difficult than that, because in external science we study the external things, but here we study subtle things, where microscopes and even the other instruments will not come to our help. Our only instrument is our mind. Mind itself is the instrument with which we study our own minds, our own mental states, our own higher states if there are. It is like taking the mind and turning it inward. The mind, which has been all along since childhood, trained very nicely, very proficiently to look at things outside. The mind has been trained in that way. Now the same mind is an instrument for spirituality, for Raj Yoga, where you have to use the reflexive power of the mind to study itself. We have never taught our children, we have taught them how to study the whole world. We have taught them how to use the computers beautifully, use their arms, how to play sports, how to develop external skills. That's a wonderful thing. Swamiji says, even to excel in that, you require concentration. So excellence in the external world was never a problem with Indians. And Swamiji says, I don't mind if people use all their energy, spend a lot of energy in developing external skills, trying to study the external world, as scientists have been doing. But at the same time, he says, if you neglect another aspect of our personality, the higher levels of our existence, our own mind, which is perceivable by us, which we encounter every day, just as we encounter our health, our body, our pranamaya kosha, the second level of existence. As I told you, it's good to remember these 5 levels of existence. Annamaya kosha, the physical body; pranamaya kosha, the life forces, the energy levels which we experience in our body, which helps us to run our body, the breathing, which is essential for even for survival of our body. If you cannot breathe properly, if some of your organs don't work properly, you can't expect to lead a healthy life, a happy life. So we live at these 2 levels, pranamaya kosha and annamaya kosha, which is the body, physical body, the pranamaya kosha, which powers this physical body. Then we come to the subject of Raj Yoga, that is manomaya kosha. Though Raj Yoga deals with the lower 2 levels, it starts with pranayama, it starts with asanas, it starts with yama and niyama. So the first 4 steps of Patanjali's 8 steps, the first 4 steps surprisingly deal with this pranamaya kosha and the annamaya kosha, the lower 2 levels. So when we go from the gross to the subtle, we grow from the body to the prana. We know what role the prana plays in keeping the body healthy. If there is any disturbance in the prana, our body becomes diseased. We don't breathe properly, we don't eat properly, we don't give it the proper food, and we misuse the body, then we waste its resources. Everybody knows how we are wasting our resources of the body. So if we don't keep the body in fit condition by exercising self-control, which is known as asana. Asana doesn't mean doing some physical exercise just to make your body strong. Asana means having a control over the annamaya kosha and the pranamaya kosha. That's why you use asana and pranayama in combination, which are the 3rd and 4th steps of the yoga. And you use them in combination so that your pranamaya kosha and the annamaya kosha are working in a fit condition, in a balanced way, in a harmonious way. So we are fine till that level. Everybody who swears by yoga these days are just bothered about the pranamaya kosha and the annamaya kosha. So they want to keep the body as fit as possible and live as long as possible and be as healthy as possible, so that they can live in this world without any trouble. That is fine. That is fine. That is also a part of yoga. That is also a part of science, which helps you to do this, to deal with the external world, which we call as the Annamaya kosha, not only at the individual level, but at the universal level. The whole universe also has a Annamaya kosha. It has a Pranamaya kosha, the universal prana, which is influencing us. Even the tiny COVID virus has a little prana in it, and that is creating havoc with the pranas of different people. You see, such a tiny protein molecule, can you imagine the universal prana it is able to shake? It has shaken the most powerful economies of the world. The mightiest of people cannot fight this small virus. So do you think this prana is an insignificant thing? It is so powerful that it can shake societies, it can shake the whole world. It can bring terror to the minds of people. What is the reason? Because it is connected to this universal prana. Somewhere along the line, this virus, just because it wanted to survive, it caught hold of the universal prana and it started attacking because it wanted to survive desperately. Perhaps it felt its life is being threatened. So it started attacking the human beings and playing havoc with our prana, our breathing. You just stop breathing when these viruses multiply in your body. They just stop you from breathing. Then you understand even what a tiny little of prana shakti, which is part of this cosmic prana, can do to a individual person. We think we are very strong. Our Annamaya kosha is very strong. We can live with thousands and thousands of viruses in our body, bacteria. We have been fighting all along. I'm not saying that human beings are not strong, but the amount of prana, the training of prana and the Annamaya kosha which we do, it helps us no doubt at dealing with things on these two levels. But human being is not just an animal. We are not just animal by instincts. The animal would be very happy if it lived long enough. A dog would be very happy if it lived for 14 to 20 years, which is its normal span, in a healthy way, and is able to hunt or get its food regularly and somehow survive. That anyway we are also doing. So we are no better than animals or dogs or cats. At that level we are fine. In fact, the animals are much better. They are surviving this virus in a much better way than us. So when you talk of the Annamaya kosha and the Pranamaya kosha levels, there are animals and there are beings which are stronger than us. So what makes human being unique? Its higher three levels of the Manomaya kosha, the Vijnanamaya kosha and the Anandamaya kosha. Three more levels which a human being has. Even an animal has those, but they are so underdeveloped that they are perfectly happy if they lead a healthy life, if they can get their food easily, and if they can procreate and create more of their progeny. That's what animals do. They're perfectly happy in their own world and they don't disturb others. The whole world is going on like that. Animals are happy because they don't have a higher life. They are happy if their Pranamaya kosha is supporting its Annamaya kosha for 14 years or 20 years. A typical dog would feel very happy, as if a man feels happy if he lives for 90 years or 80 years. He'll feel very happy that I've led a complete life. But what's the quality of the life? That is more important. Does it really matter? Vivekananda lived only for 40 years, less than 40 years. Jesus also did not live long. Shankaracharya lived for 32 years. But did they just live on the Annamaya and Pranamaya level? Then they would have been no better than animals. Even we will not be any better than animals if we continue to live and be happy and satisfied and fulfilled at these two levels. If you are convinced that we will be happy if we lead a long life, a healthy life, and have good quality food, enough to eat, and enough good health to enjoy that food, and also live peacefully for say 80 years or at the most 100 years. That's the maximum we can hope. There are some who go beyond that also. But even that, 100 years after living that even animals do. The tortoises live for more than 100 years. They live for 200 years. Some of the animals, elephants, live more than us. They are more healthy than us. They are never affected by these viruses. And with very little food, I mean, some of the animals can hibernate and stay under the soil, the snakes and all, without eating anything for years and years together. So they have a very robust Annamaya Kosha and a robust Pranamaya Kosha. And their quality at these two levels are far, far, far superior than human beings. So it's not a very big achievement to use yoga for these two things. It is good to have a healthy body, definitely. But then it is just useful if we use it for higher purposes. That is the idea. So Swami Vivekananda very famously once said, somebody asked him, you are straining yourself so much. He knew that he had so many physical ailments that he is not going to live long. So somebody asked him, why do you strain so much? Then he said, it's better to wear out than rust out. A iron, if it is kept for 100 years, it will rust and then it will decay and degenerate. Whereas if it is used as a knife, perhaps its life will be shorter, but at least it will be of some use to the world. A cast iron piece lying in a corner for hundreds of years, what is the use? So Swamiji said it's better to wear out than rust and die. So also, when we come to the physical world, if yoga and if religion is used for our material benefits, then it will help the Pranamaya Kosha and the Annamaya Kosha, the two levels which we share with, predominantly we share with animals, we share it with trees, plants. Again, trees and plants live a much longer life than us. They live for thousands of years, some of the old species of trees. So but they still don't make any progress because they are at the Annamaya and Pranamaya level only. We have a special facility or a special faculty which Swamiji says is the Manomaya Kosha, the mind. And now when we tap the powers of this mind, which are far superior to that of the prana and also the Annamaya Koshas, the more we go towards the subtle, the more we come towards the power source which is there in us. And the mind has such a great influence on both the prana and the Annamaya Kosha, our body, that we have not made it a subject of study. Yoga was the first attempt made on a scientific basis to study the personality of a human being in depth. The real purpose of yoga should be to take us to these higher three levels of Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Anandamaya Kosha. I'll explain what those things are during the course of this talk. But Swamiji says, when we start, even before starting the scientific study of Raj Yoga, we have to make sure that we have the right instrument. And the only instrument, there is only one instrument, one equipment that is required. In studying the external world, you need so many things. You need ultrasonic, you need microscopes, you need thousands and thousands of gadgets to study and research finer things in this universe. You have so much of experiments to make, and there are so many gadgets, millions and millions of devices which you have to use to make a study of the external world. But fortunately, to study the internal world, there is only one instrument that is required, and it should be in perfect shape, that is your own mind. That is why Swamiji is saying, we just have one instrument with which we start a study, scientific study of the internal world, and that instrument is our own mind. Now the question may arise, how can the mind study this Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, which is a slightly higher state, I'll tell you what it is, and the Anandamaya Kosha, the three higher levels of existence which are unique to human beings. How does Vedanta says, how does the mind how can the mind be used? How can mind be used as an instrument? So Swami Vivekananda very clearly says the mind has two functions. Unfortunately, the animals do not have. Animals also have a primitive mind where it can just do some basic thinking. If an enemy comes, it can escape. If food is available, it can smell and then it can take food which is not poisonous. So his sense organs are very well developed. The Annamaya Kosha is very nicely developed. The Pranamaya Kosha is also very nicely developed, because the power which a lion and all the other animals and the swift animals demonstrate, they shows they have a much stronger prana than us. They have a robust health. They are physically very strong. They know what food to eat. So at these two levels, there is hardly any, they are far superior, or they are as superior as human beings. But when it comes to Manomaya Kosha, they have only one faculty in them, that of looking at the external world. They don't have a self-reflexive capacity. Self-reflexive capacity means the capacity of the mind to study its own states, the different states of the mind. Just as we study the external states, which are solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma. So for so many gross states we have found. So many finer forms of prana we have found, the energies. We have studied chemical energy, we have studied electrical energy, we have studied the fire, we have studied the different acids. Inside our own body, we have studied the respiratory prana, we have studied the digestive system, we have studied the nervous system, how the nerve currents are flowing in our body. So this is all the study of prana. We have developed a lot in that. Though we don't know how to use it, but we have understood the functions. A doctor may know how his prana is working, but there is no guarantee that he can control his prana to have a good health. He may help and treat other people, but when it comes to himself, he may also have the same heart attack. He may also have the same problems which other patients have. So the fact that you can control the external prana of somebody else doesn't mean that you can control your internal prana. So at these two basic levels, the study is comparatively very easy. Yoga, though it is people pay thousands and thousands of dollars and pounds to study yoga even for a few hours. It's one of the most, I mean, it's one of the professions where you can earn a lot, because people somehow want good health and they don't understand these things are available absolutely free, but there are people who make commercial use of it. Anyway, it helps you to make your Annamaya Kosha very strong, to make your Pranamaya Kosha also very strong. So there is no doubt that this yoga helps you at these two levels. But yoga has 5 more layers to cover. I mean, at least 3 more layers: the Manomaya Kosha, the Vijnanamaya Kosha, and the Anandamaya Kosha, which forms the higher personality, forms the total personality of a human being. So what is this Manomaya Kosha? Manomaya Kosha is the mind, which has been divided into two. One is the mind and the other is the self-reflexive capacity of the mind, which enables the mind to study its own thoughts. Human being is the only person who can feel that he is getting angry. He can control anger. He knows that the anger vrittis are coming. When I feel angry, if a person is a well-developed yogi, he can control anger by not allowing the thoughts, the angry thoughts, to be manifest itself. He can stop it at the source. So one part of the mind has the capacity to control the other part of the mind. This is known as the self-reflexive capacity of the human mind. So this is known as, in plain language, it is known as introspection. When you introspect, what you do is you try to find out why your mind is behaving in the way it behaves. We don't take the mind for granted. Unfortunately, this simple science, or this very, very important science, has not been taught to children either as part of their curriculum or also as part of their training at home. No parent bothers to teach a child how he should control his mind. They think it is not necessary for survival. In fact, a person is doomed. The best education we can give to a child is to teach him how to control his mind, because his whole universe, his whole future, his whole happiness, his whole joy, in fact, his entire his life will have a meaning if he can control his own mind. If he cannot do it, in spite of a healthy body and a healthy prana, he will just be another animal. It will just be another animal. It appears to be a bit harsh, I'm using these words, but it is the fact. If we just train people in skills and train people in just doing things which animals do in a much better way, then what are we doing actually? How are we helping that human being? Have we taught him how to handle the Manomaya Kosha? So the science, Patanjali says, if we know how to control our minds, use the reflexive powers of our mind to train our own minds to control the pranamaya and the annamaya kosha in a much better way, then we will be more healthy, not only more healthy physically but also mentally, and be more joyful. Our mental thoughts will be, when we decide that we should be joyful, we will get only the happy thoughts, we will not get the depressive thoughts. So that kind of control, of course, that is an ideal state where you can decide what kind of thoughts you want. That is possible only for, some of the greatest yogis who never felt sorrow. Even Sri Ramakrishna's wonderful example. Turiyananji once, one of his disciples, Swami Turiyananda, saw him suffering with cancer. He was suffering from cancer. There was terrible pain. And definitely the Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha of Thakur was suffering. But he had that wonderful control over his mind which could detach himself from the body. And in spite of his pain, which was just an external manifestation, in spite of his cancer, Turiyananji discovered that I see on your face that you have a wonderful sense of joy inside. So then Thakur appreciates him. He said, how could you see that? Because Turiyananji could see the subtle states, the subtle joy that was in Thakur in spite of his pain and all the external things. Because he was in a position to control his mind and put it on higher levels, to use the higher levels of personality to concentrate on Ishta, his Krishna, the Divine Mother, that the problems of the lower personality, the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, were transcended. He could easily transcend at will. He did not have to make any effort to tell the mind that it is the body that is suffering. It is the body that will die. Why are we afraid of death? Because we think our body is going to go. We have identified ourselves with our Pranamaya Kosha, with our Annamaya Kosha so much. Our minds are so much attached to that the very thought of sickness or ill health or disability or even death causes terrible fear. But for Sri Ramakrishna, though he was living in the body, though he was suffering, though he had almost all the problems which any human being has, he had cancer, he had all the troubles, but at the same time, he knew how to transcend those troubles, even transcend the Manomaya Kosha and go into Samadhi. That's the goal of Raj Yoga. So Swamiji says, what is the benefit of this science? The only benefit of this science is that it helps you to remove misery and fear from your life, which are the two basic problems which the happiest of human being, apparently the richest and the happiest of the persons, also, you ask him, he encounters misery and fear of death sometime of his life or the other. There is no person, there is no exception. You show me the strongest emperor, Alexander, also had this kind of fear of death. Nobody wants to die. Nobody wants to give up the things which he has carefully accumulated over hundreds of years of tens and 20 decades of effort. Nobody wants to leave anything which he has earned with his hard effort behind. So that fear is there. What will happen to my wealth? What will happen to my children? What will happen to all the people who are dependent on me? So this is a very, very logical and a very natural thing which is common with animals. So the spiritual people say, we won't help you to solve those problems. You cannot be possibly solving all the problems at the Annamaya Kosha level and the Pranamaya Kosha level. Otherwise, Thakur Sri Ramakrishna would not have suffered from cancer. He didn't to come to tell you that I'll help you to cure diseases. I'll help you to live a life of worldly life full of joy and enjoyment, external enjoyment. He didn't come to teach you that, because he knew that there is a limit to that. You may enjoy for 50 years, you may enjoy for 60 years. Some disease will catch up with you. Something will catch up with you, and then you will find that you have to leave all these things behind. So this Sri Ramakrishna definitely did not come. So many people fail to understand why Swami Vivekananda fell ill. If he was a yogi, why did he fall ill? They did not come to make you animals. Sri Ramakrishna, Swamiji and Holy Mother did not come to make you a healthy animal. You can go to any doctor for that. You can go to any yoga teacher for that. They'll allow you to, they will teach you how to keep your body healthy and maybe extend it for some 20 more years. That's all they can do. They can't promise you eternal life. They can't promise you freedom from fear. They can't even promise you that all the things which you have gathered around you, you will be able to take in a special plane after you die. None of these people who teach us how to keep our Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha in good shape will teach us how to get rid of the fear of death, how to get rid of our desires, how to get joy. In fact, the simple thing which we think is so accessible and so easy to get, just by eating a few nice things, we think we get joy. But how to make that joy eternal, none of them promise. But these prophets, the spiritual teachers, the founders of sciences like Raj Yoga, Swami Vivekananda says, the benefit of this study, because every science has asked this question. Anybody who's studying physics, chemistry, biology, the person who is teaching asks you, why do you want to study this subject? Then you have to give him a reason. I want to become a biologist, I want to become a doctor, I want to become this. So there is a goal of life. So also the spiritual person, Swamiji says, you may ask this question, why should I study Raj Yoga? Physics will help me to become a physicist. It will help me to get some money, to earn a living, earn a relatively prosperous life. If I become a doctor, I may get a job. So all these are answers. They are fine. But what will Raj Yoga do? If I study this Raj Yoga, if I put efforts, what will it help me in attaining or achieving? So Swamiji says, the two things which it will help you to attain is to remove your misery forever and give you eternal life, or eternal fear. Losing fear of death means giving you eternal life. When you, with the power of yoga, you will go to higher and higher levels, you leave the Manomaya Kosha, go to the Vijnanmaya Kosha, where your buddhi is activated, where the higher faculty, the power of intuition, the power of understanding in depth what human life is awakened. And then when you even transcend that, go to the Anandamaya Kosha, where you get a glimpse of the wonderful joy which only Samadhi can give you. And then he says, when you enter that state of Samadhi or kingdom of God, as Jesus said, when you attain to that state, or Nirvana, as Buddha said, they have experienced these states and they know that after having reached that state, you don't feel the sufferings, the misery of the lower. Though for an externally, from a person who is very gross, he may think Thakur is suffering or was suffering from cancer. He also saw Buddha die. The Christians, the people who were followers of Christ, saw Christ being crucified. They saw his Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha getting disintegrated with their own eyes. They saw the body being crucified. But what they did not understand, that Jesus Christ did not lose anything. Buddha did not lose anything. Sri Ramakrishna did not lose anything. They are still alive. They are still with us. They are still existing in this higher, with their higher personalities. The higher personalities which they focus their concentration on, focus their consciousness on, and they slowly raised themselves up and entered as a lesson to humanity. Not that they wanted to do it, they were not sadhakas, they came as prophets, they were already perfect, but they just came and showed you how it is done. Buddha came and showed you how step by step one could attain to nirvana. Sri Ramakrishna came and showed you, Jesus also came and showed you how by living a right kind of life, having the right kind of attitude in life, not as a dogma, not because I have to follow it because the Bible says it. He says just take the basic teachings of Christ, take the basic teachings of Buddha, and see how it tallies with the wonderful teachings of these Upanishads, how it tallies with the wonderful teachings of this Raj Yoga, where the only goal in life is to transcend these lower koshas and go and identify less with the body but more with the spirit which is within you. So the kingdom of God is that of the spirit, not of the body. Otherwise, he would have taught you how to retain this body, how to. But yoga says, though you may start with the asana, you may start with yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, but don't forget that your goal is to go to the higher levels. So the whole science of Raj Yoga, according to Swamiji, is to train the mind, train the self-reflexive part of your mind to go and explore, just as a scientific person or a scientist explores the depths of the sea or the depths or the innermost secrets of the atom and the molecule or the quantum world. So the similar approach, if you do and explore the different layers of the mind, which Patanjali has nicely classified into 5, the 5 vrittis. You see, it's such a powerful tool. He says all our mental thoughts can exist only in 5 different forms. Just as we have 5 different states, solid, liquid, gaseous, plasma, and all the different states which the physicists have discovered. So also the mind, according to Patanjali, is made of only 5 vrittis, the pancha vrittis. You don't have to understand every thought of your mind. So if you understand these 5 vrittis, when we'll discuss that when we come to the main text of the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, but now we are discussing Swamiji's Raj Yoga. But what I was telling you is that there are 5 different vrittis, and Patanjali says these 5 different vrittis, pramana, anumana, there are so many, we'll discuss that. So these vrittis will determine how you train your mind or how you control your mind or how you use your mind to lead a fulfilled life, to transform yourself, transform your personality, get more and more transcendence, raise your consciousness from a lower level to a higher level, raise yourself from animal to human being and from human being to a divine being, to a yogi. That is the goal of life. We are already animals. There is nobody needs to tell us that as human beings we share many characteristics with animals. We don't have to do any effort to, but even in that we require some training. Some animals are much better off. They have better control over our prana, their prana and their annamaya kosha. So that is fine. We use the yoga, the lower steps of yoga, to make our body strong and healthy. But that is the only purpose. It should not be thought of as the only goal of life. Otherwise, we'll end up only after these 2-3 steps. We'll not go beyond pranayama. So those steps have to be done very quickly, and then you have to go to higher aspects of yoga, which begins with the control of the mind. That's what Swamiji says in his foreword. In his introduction, he says, I am not here to teach you the lower forms of yoga, which the whole humanity is doing anyway. Everybody seems to be busy with the lower aspects of yoga. How to use pranayama, how to use the asanas to get healthy and nicer bodies so that we can enjoy more. That is fine. But then afterwards, then we'll just remain as highly civilized animals. That's all. We won't be called as human beings even. To become decent human beings, you have to tackle your mental level, the Manomaya Kosha. And that is the real purpose of teaching Raj Yoga. Swamiji says the real purpose of Raj Yoga is to know how to handle our own mind, vrittis, and use it as a powerful lever to raise our consciousness from the lower levels to the higher levels and reach the goal of life, the fulfillment of life, where you are beyond sorrow. So all the japa that we do, all the sadhana that we do is aiming, the only aim is, according to Raj Yoga, the whether you repeat the name of the Lord, whether you sit for meditation, whether you do any other religious sadhana, the aim is to take control of your mind, direct it towards an Ishta who is transcending all these. Ishta, or the God, or the Father in heaven, or the Purusha, or Brahman, whichever way you want to express him or name him. There are hundreds of names. So we take somebody who has attained to that state, who is known as the Avatara. If we can't worship God, we can worship the Son of God. If we cannot worship the Brahman, we worship Brahman as the Avatara. Because the Avatara is a person who has become one with that spirit, one with that Brahman, one with that consciousness. So by worshipping him through our sadhana, through the mantra, mantra is just a means which we get from the Guru, from the teacher. So that mantra connects us to our Ishta, who in turn takes you and gives you the highest realization, and that is the goal of yoga, and takes you slowly from a state which is full of sorrow, where we are stuck with the other animals, but we raise ourselves a little bit, refining our mind, developing noble qualities, and becoming decent human beings first. And after that, when we strive harder, we use that reflexive power of the mind to develop our Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Anandamaya Kosha, and finally reach that state of transcendence which gives us immortality, which makes us, which the Upanishad says, Shrunvantu Vishve Amrutasya Putra Aye Dhamani Divyani Tastu Vedahametam Purusham Mahantam Aditya Varnam Tamasap Parastat. So these are two different verses from different. Swamiji has combined that Uttishtata Jagrata Prapya Navaran Nibodhata. So those rishis, they say, I can show you that state. I can show you that state which is transcendent, where you will lose all fear of death, where you will become immortal. Amrutasya Puta. Amruta means where there is no death. You are the sons of immortality. Amrutasya Putraha. So the Rishi is telling the whole humanity, I have discovered the way by transcending even the Vijnanamaya Kosha and the Anandamaya Kosha and connecting you with that infinite consciousness, the infinite bliss of Brahman or God, where Veda Metam Purusham Mahantam. He is the Purusha, who is the greatest of all Purushas. He is the Parama Purusha or the Brahman, our Ishta. And we meditate on him through our Ishta, because he is also that same Brahman which has taken a human form. Because we, at the level of human beings, we can imagine or even take the help of God only as a human being. That's why Swamiji used to make fun and say, if an elephant meditates on a god, it will be a huge elephant, another elephant god. It can't. It will not like the idea of taking help from another human being. It will prefer to take help from one of its own species. So when we think of God, when we think of an Avatara, we will have to consider him to be a human being. Of course, in our mythology, there are Vishnu is there with 4 arms and 10 arms, and then Durga with 10 arms. So these are all interpolate. I mean, we have just tried to show that these deities are more powerful than human beings. We do not want to worship who is less powerful than you, than ourselves. Then we don't want anybody to we worship somebody who is less powerful than our. Then how can he help us? So we want our God, whom we worship, to be more powerful than us. That's why we have 10 arms instead of 2. Or we consider him to be all powerful, all knowing, all loving, having all the human qualities which we have, in a infinitely large quantity. So that's why the Khandana which we sing, Khandana Bhava Bandhana, that's a beautiful prayer, universal prayer addressed to universal God. Though it was addressed to Sri Ram Krishna, Swami Vivekananda composed this for everybody. Khandana Bhava Bandhana, then he says, Nirguna Gunamoy. He is Nirguna because God cannot have any qualities. The Supreme Consciousness doesn't have qualities. But when he comes as an incarnation, when Sri Ram Krishna, when Christ, when Buddha, when they come as human beings, as avatars, they come with gunamay, they come with qualities. What are these gunas? Compassion, love, universal love, all the qualities which human beings have, but expanded so much, or maybe in a very, very big measure they have this. If a human being has a little compassion, God has infinite compassion. If human being has a little bit of love, a spark of that love, God has the universal love. So they come with the gunas just for our sake, to lead us from human beings to a divine life. So that is the goal of Raj Yoga. So that is the use. There will be eternally pure and perfect Atman or Brahman will realize. There will be no more fear of death. He will attain something which cannot be destroyed. Amritatvam Icchan. Swamiji says, he will gather something. What we gather now is something which will be destroyed, or at least has to be left behind when we die. But what we acquire when we attain spirituality is something which will go beyond the grave. It will follow us in our next birth, if you believe in rebirth, or if you go to heaven. All these qualities can be taken with you. All these noble qualities, the good thing which we have done, and all the wonderful development which we have done by training our mind, by self-control, by attaining higher and higher levels will never be lost. That's why Sri Krishna promises Arjuna that whatever good you do, don't worry. Even if you don't complete it in this life, it will never be lost. You will start from where you ended, and you can continue that sadhana in the next life. So that is the idea behind this karma and rebirth in our Indian philosophy. They convince you at least that if you cannot for some reason attain, but the emphasis is given that we should realize God in this birth itself, because there is no guarantee that we'll be born as human beings or we'll get a wonderful opportunity. So one should not be careless. There is a complaint against the Hindus that Hindus believe in rebirth and karma. So they say, okay, we will relax this birth in this birth, so that we in the next birth we can anyway continue. But it is not so easy. One should not be under that impression. Sri Ramakrishna gave some wonderful stories. I don't have time now, but he used to say, don't think that way. No doubt it will be continued, but you do not know what kind of birth you will get. If you don't get a proper birth, if you don't get a proper guide, spiritual guide, then it may take several births to again get a human birth, or maybe to get a proper guidance. No doubt the karma will be there, it will be stored, it will be there in the form of samskaras, but it may take time to fulfill. I mean, you may not get that same opportunity. So when you have got these three wonderful things, Manushyatvam, Mumukshatvam, Mahapurusha, Sanshraya. Manushyatvam means a human body, which is very, very important. Though the Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha, we should not belittle it. If it is used for a good purpose, it is one of the best instruments we have. The only thing is we should not misuse it. We should use it properly. So, Manushyatvam, that is a human body. Mumukshutvam, that desire for freedom. Very, very few people in this world know what this word of freedom is. They cannot even enjoy pure physical freedom. How many people try even for freedom? They practically prefer to remain slaves. Slaves to money, slaves to the so many things of the world. We are practically slaves. We think we are free. But if we sit down and analyze and make a list of things to which we are slaves, we will get a big list, huge list. We will be surprised. We are slaves to so many things. We are slaves to name, we are slaves to fame, we are slaves to property, we are slaves to our family, we are slaves to many things. So the idea of freedom is just a misnomer. That's why Holy Mother Sharda Devi, somebody was, in those days, there were these widows. And Indian system was such that widows could not remarry normally in those days. So, but there was some modern section of society which was fighting against that rule. That why should this rule be made? They should be allowed. So one mother, I think, was asking Holy Mother Sharda Devi, why don't you tell this girl, says she wants to remain alone, she doesn't want to marry. Why can't you tell her to get married? So mother said, see, why you people are forcing if somebody wants to remain single? Freedom is such a great thing that at least that lady is 50% free. She said, you send her to Nivedita school. She can become a good teacher. She can do something useful for society. Why do you want to bind her to this world? See, Mother, Holy Mother, though herself, she lived a ideal, she herself was married to Sri Ramakrishna, but you see how free her mind was. She enjoyed, she knew the value of freedom. She said, why do you force somebody who's, she is at least half free. She can do whatever she likes. She can take the name of the Lord. She doesn't have to forcibly put herself into bondage. So if she wants to be free, you don't force her. What you think is good for you, you do it, fine, but don't force her. Let her go to Nivedita school. Nivedita was looking for some good teachers, and this girl was educated. Said it's maybe she's a widow, but that doesn't mean that she has to enter the world again. If she doesn't want to, and if she wants to do some noble work by remaining single, there will be less responsibility. She'll be at least half free. So why are you pressurizing her? Already she's half free, at least from the worldly sense. So don't force her. So that is the idea. So the idea of spiritual freedom is so difficult for human beings. Even the idea of physical freedom we can't appreciate or enjoy, or understand. So what about the mukti? So mumukshutvam is the freedom, not just physical freedom, as Holy Mother said here, though she said she is already half free, but she has to strive for a higher freedom also. Whether you are a householder or whether you are a monk or whether you are half free or full free, the idea is total freedom. Half free will not do. So the total freedom, mumukshutvam, is a second quality or the second wonderful gift which God has given us. First, we have got manushyatvam, that is, we have got a human body which we should use very carefully to the extent we can. Then we have mumukshutvam, the intense desire to be free, which can be possible only through yoga and through spiritual practices. And then Mahapurusha Sanshraya. Mahapurusha Sanshraya means the help of a great soul. It can be Ishta, it can be your Guru, it can be the Ishta Deva, the ideal which you are following. See, these Mahapurushas, they are not dead and gone. Christ is still living. Buddha is still living. Sri Ramakrishna is still living. Krishna is still living. They may not exist in the physical form, but they still exist in their higher levels. And they come for our help. They come to help us. So Mahapurusha in this Sanshraya means the help of a great soul. So that soul can be in the body, or can, if it is in the body, then you can call it a guru or a teacher or a guide or anything, or a prophet, or you can even, if he is not in the body, the prophet is not alive. When Sri Ramakrishna was alive, many people came in contact with him. But they would not have benefited if they did not consider him to be a Mahapurusha. Those who considered him to be a guru, those who considered him to be a Mahapurusha, like Master Mahasaya and others, they got the benefit. So Mahapurusha Sanshraya may be there, but we may not take the benefit of that. So as long as we get these three things, these are the most valuable things. So Vedanta Sara, Vivek Chudamani, Sri Shankaracharya says, these things are very, very, very rare. First is a human body, which is very valuable. And the goal of the very purpose of human body is to become free. So that desire for freedom also is very, very rare. Even the desire for gross freedom is rare, leave alone the higher freedom. And then the desire for opportunity of the support of a Mahapurusha. Mahapurusha, Sanshraya. Sanshraya means it is like Ashraya, the support, the guidance. So this is something which is very rare. All other things you can get, money, wealth, career, profession, everything is there, but everything has to be left behind. But these three things, you should use it carefully. Even the human body, the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha, they're very valuable if it is used for a higher purpose. Otherwise, it can be destroyed or it can be used for destructive purposes, then it doesn't serve the purpose. Even if you have the desire for freedom, but you don't know how to use this, then it is of no use. So, Manushatvam, Mumukshutvam, and Mahapurusha Sanshraya, these three things combination is there in our life. It is better that we use the science of this Raj Yoga. That is the gist of what Swamiji says. If we use this science, which is as precise as any other science in the world, then we shall reach the goal of life. It is absolutely an exact science. That is what Swami Vivekananda is pointing out here. Don't think it is not a precise science like mathematics or physics or chemistry. Whatever exactitude or the certitude which this physical sciences or the theoretical sciences which we have developed, and we boast so much, they are rational, they are exact, they are perfect, they do not believe on belief and dogmas and all those things. It is perfect. Swamiji doesn't deny that, and he says, in fact, science should be encouraged. The scientific spirit should be encouraged. But at the same time, he says, you have no right to say that this Raj Yoga is not a scientific way. If the Guru or if the Yogi or if Patanjali says, or if God says, or if the Bible says, or if Jesus Christ says, if these prophets have told certain things and given certain methods, they have practiced it in their lives, and let us, before dismissing that, try to practice it ourselves in our life and see whether they yield results or not. Every one of these methods have to yield result, as every science promises you that you will reach certain conclusions. So this is a spiritual science. The Raj Yoga as a science is the theme of his foreword. So Swamiji took so much of time to explain to the Western world that I have not come to teach you some kind of mystery, something which you cannot understand. I will teach you, take you by the hand through all the steps which Patanjali did hundreds of years ago. I want to take you to through this journey of spirituality as a scientist does his student in the laboratory. I'll use the same method and show you that it will lead to the same goal which a scientist expects